Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this edition of Leak Project. I am your host, Rex Bear, and we have guest Eric Gajewski with us from TradCatKnight.com, one of the most viewed and followed traditional Catholic websites worldwide, as seen on Gloria TV, Spirit Daily, Shoebat, Reddit, Before It's News, and many other notable websites. Eric interviews guests from around the world concerning the third secret of Fatima and Planet X and how it all ties together, different conspiracies, secret societies, mystery schools, the Illuminati, biblical prophecies, and many other topics are discussed with Eric and his guests. So if you'd like to know more, check out his YouTube channel, TradCatKnight, updated almost daily. And it's a real honor to speak with you, Eric. Thanks for joining us here at the Leak Project. How the heck are you?
Doing very well, Rex. I appreciate the consideration for having me on, and I look forward to this next hour covering whatever you want to get into, sir.
Absolutely. Now, you have so much... You've got such a following on your website and your YouTube channel. You reach tens of thousands of people. And what is it like for you going down this path? I mean, what got you onto this journey?
Well, again, what we try to do is try to take the current events and plug it into the equation from a traditional Catholic point of view, which is a little different because most of your outlets, your news outlets, are predominantly going to be Protestantism, or the mainstream is really controlled by, however you want to say it, the global elite, however you want to pin them. And so it's a little bit different when people are coming onto our page and getting the information. But essentially, that's the reason why I started this, is because we felt from a traditional Catholic point of view, the right information wasn't getting out there. The proper angle or spin, however you want to put it, wasn't getting out to the mainstream. And so that's why I started, with TradCatKnight, it was 2.5 years ago, but before that, Defeat Modernism. And ever since that, we've been trying to expose the corruption in the Catholic Church, the Judeo-Freemasonic takeover of the church, which ties in with the third secret of Fatima. And, we've got a lot of celebrities, athletes. As a matter of fact, last night when I was doing a little evangelizing, I reached out to a few more international models that I was talking to off to the side, and they're now following along. So that's what I do. It's getting very late in the hour. All the signs are here. And as I mentioned off air, Planet X certainly is an aspect of the third secret of Fatima. So that's what we do. We try to obviously bring individuals to the light from our perspective of the true faith and Catholicism, and take it from there and show how all of this, interplays with one another, whether it's, GMOs or whether it's, chemtrails. I mean, all this stuff ties into this end time global conspiracy, if you want to call it.
Now, when would you say the Vatican or the Catholic religion got taken over?
Well, when you study what the popes said prior to the Second Vatican Council, which is really our main focus, was this council that got together and basically labeled it Catholic, but it wasn't. It was these Freemasonic principles, and Freemasonry is an opposed religion to the Catholic religion. And in the end, truly, it's a satanic pedophile club, to say the least. And it's something the Church always warned about before the Second Vatican Council, several popes in particular, Pope Leo XIII, Pope St. Pius X, and they warned in the late 1800s, early 1900s, that the Catholic Church had been infiltrated, that they were in the bosom of the Church. And basically, the whole false prophet routine, the whole sheep and wolves clothing, that was actually the scripture for today for us in the Church. And that's what we have. We have a situation right now. I've been on air publicly saying this, that I believe Francis is not only the true Pope, we can get into this a little bit, but he's a 33rd degree Freemason, given all the teachings that he puts out there, and then also the hand signs, his occultic hand signs, his Freemasonic hand signs, the hidden hand, the Baphomet, all that. It's really, I don't think people realize how close we are to these, what we would call the great chastisements, but it's long before the 1950s, Rex.
Okay. Now, also, when you look at some of the Freemason degrees, I've done a lot of research into that mystery school, and I know that you can get up to the 32nd degree, and then after that, if there's different levels and degrees, it's not a part of the specific Freemasonry. There's other, I guess, sects or offshoots of the Freemasons. But how did you get to that number 33? That's what I'm wondering.
Well, 33rd degree is a very significant number. I guess it's just through research, Rex. In the end, for us, I would agree with you there. I would say the lower level Masons have no idea that what they're following in the end is Luciferian, but you could study Albert Pike in his books. What was it, Schools and Dogma, Moral Schools and Dogma, or something like that. But when you really study it, the upper echelon Freemasons very much know that it's Luciferian. And again, from our perspective, the world order world socialist republic, which is going to have a one world religion. Now, Freemasonry and universalism ties together. So within the Freemasonic sect, I mean, you could be quote unquote a Catholic, a Protestant, a Buddhist, so long as you basically forego some of the fundamental teachings, you can, and you look at your neighbor as having an equal opinion, then you're A-OK, so to speak. And that's what you're seeing in the Vatican II church, or what's transpired in the church since Vatican II, is you see this constant relaying that, other religions are okay. Everyone can be incorporated into the church. That's even written in the Vatican II texts themselves. But yeah, it's an interesting study for me. I mean, just for me, it requires a lot of study. But I would definitely say that Francis is a 33rd degree Mason. And I've seen others. I think there was another. He wasn't even Catholic. I forget his last name. But he came out publicly and said that he believed he was a 33rd degree Mason. And then there's also we have a notable traditional Catholic apologist, John Salza. You could look him up on YouTube. But he was a 32nd degree Freemason, and he came out of that sect and ultimately started blowing the whistle and tooting the horn on the Second Vatican Council as well. But for me, yeah, it's just the actual teachings and then some of the hand signs that are given.
Okay. Now, obviously, when you look at certain hand signs and gestures, there's the as above, so below. There's a lot of different things that people can do in pictures to where if you're not, I guess you could say, in the know with those certain hand gestures, then you just look at it like, okay, that's just a typical picture. So certainly things to look for. I was just wondering about the 33rd degree thing. But another thing I've also noticed is the Vatican is really pushing this approach towards, at least I saw this video, correct me if I'm wrong here, I'll bet you've seen this too, it was a couple years ago where they were singing in the Vatican, they were singing in Latin, and they were actually calling out to Lucifer.
Yeah, that's common. I'm not going to say that I'm an expert in this area. My old spiritual director, Father Paul Kramer, answered this very eloquently. Perhaps I'll do a blog on this, but there is an orthodox understanding to Lucifer. Now, what's also interesting too, maybe your listeners know, there's an observatory out in Arizona in which the Vatican seized a large portion of control, which is also entitled Lucifer. So what you'll find, especially with Freemasonry and Catholicism, I mean, it's very much counterfeit. So there's kind of like a dual meaning. I'll give you an example. One of our symbols that we give off on our website is the double-headed eagle, right? Well, that's actually a symbol for 33rd degree Freemasons. I've actually been called out as being, a Masonic infiltrator. When that's not at all what it means. The Catholic understanding to that actually represents the two eagle heads represents church and state, and how per Catholic teaching, church and state are not to be separate. You see, as a Catholic, we don't believe in separation of church and state. That's a heresy. It's called the Americanist heresy that the Catholic Church has condemned. So, but then the Freemasons take that symbol, they rip it off, and then they use it for their, for their understanding, if you will. And so, like, another example too, Rex, would be the upside down cross, right? Well, you look at that in the Vatican, and you could say, okay, well, they're openly promoting Antichrist, which, by the way, I would agree with. But they can get away with it because the upside down cross also is the cross of St. Peter, because he was crucified upside down. You follow what I'm saying? So they can get away with it. And how you know it's we're moving into the New Age and these Luciferian teachings is by what they teach. So the symbols only support what we're saying. I mean, we can openly point out all of the Freemasonic principles, whether it's right to religious liberty, liberty of conscience, the ecumenical movement, separation of church and state. I mean, we could go on and on. I mean, I did my homework on it, and they're teaching about 90% of what Freemasonry actually teaches. So when I meet the everyday Catholic and I tell them, I said, hey, you might as well be going to mass down at the local lodge there, because you're going to be taught the same things. And again, Freemasonry is an opposed religion. But in terms of the hand signs, yes, there's the Baphomet. We saw Cardinal Tagle and Francis doing this recently, and they get away with it because it's also, what is it, the sign language of love. Who was it? Helen Keller. Yeah. Okay, so and that's how they say they get away with
you.
Yeah, we love you, and it's like, really, come on. I mean, look what he's teaching. I mean, it's so obvious that they're trying to formalize a one world religion. Then also the 666, which you're seeing Trump now use a lot. I mean, I can't go by one day without seeing Trump give this hand sign, and Francis has been doing it. And then also we have the hidden hand too, which is very much Marxist and occultic, where they have the hand hidden in between the shirt there above the chest. Ted Cruz has been seen doing that on some of his videos. So, it's one big club. And listen, you don't get into a position of power unless you're in on the game. I hate to break the news to you, whether it's politics or religion at this point, they are in control, and they want their one world religion. They want their one world socialist republic where everyone is seen as equals, that, this kind of utopian dream that the Catholic Church warned about. And it's no longer, from our perspective, the city of God. It's the city of man. It's the Tower of Babel all over again.
So when you look at these things that are taking place right now, for example, they've built new statues close to certain courthouses and such of Baphomet and other occult symbols. When you have some people that study those specific systems, like Baphomet, for example, I've talked to people that break that symbol down into an allegory of the earth and the heavens, as above, so below, because you've got the yin and the yang representation in that, as well as the feminine, the masculine, up, down, left, right, everything. But then a lot of times, as you said earlier, these certain, we can just call them dungeon masters, I guess, people behind the scenes that clandestinely control things. As you said, they'll take certain symbols and they'll use their own representation. They almost hijack it. I've had people ask me about the symbol that I've got on Leak Project. It's an eyeball inside of the hand, and people go, man, that's satanic. That's the all-seeing eye of Lucifer. No, it's not. It's an eye that sees through the veil of deceit, and the hand represents protection. It doesn't represent the all-seeing eye of Lucifer. So you're right. They can definitely take these things and they can manipulate them, and they'll tell the masses that it's evil and it's wrong, and they'll use it for evil purposes, yet in reality, maybe at one point in time, that specific sigil or symbol represented something beautiful.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's what they do. And that's you nailed it perfectly on the head, right? Even in the gospel, our Lord said people would be deceived. Even the elect, if possible, would be deceived. That's Lucifer's false light. Maybe many people think, the devil's necessarily, going to come down and just demonstrate himself to be raw evil. And it's not like that. And that's what's so scary, what's going on since the Second Vatican Council is good Catholics are being led into this phony baloney one world religion under the guise of it being Catholic. And they're marching like lemmings right off of the cliff into this formalized one world religion. Now, it's interesting that you pointed with the whole symbology aspect. That's one of the things we've been tooting the horn here over the last week or two with the whole Orlando fiasco. I mean, when you study the whole rainbow concept, however you want to put it, symbology, there is an orthodox understanding to it, right? After Noah's flood, with the rainbow, basically a sign of rebirth, regeneration, if you will. Well, to the Luciferians, it has a whole other different meaning, and it symbolizes oneness. That's why you see the push for transgenderism, the sodomy push, all that, because everyone has to be made equal under the one umbrella of this one world religion here soon. So you see people using that flag and that symbology, not realizing how it's New Age, how it's Luciferian, and it's not put in the proper context that we as Catholics have been brought up to understand. And you see that all over the place. I'm sure if you cover this a lot, whether at the Denver airport, remember the murals that they have up there? The Denver airport, what was in the background with that one communist kind of looking guy that was killing everyone? What was back there? It was the rainbow. Well, we're entering an age of false peace. I mean, you see, from a Catholic perspective, you can't unite everyone outside of that faith that was established. Again, from our perspective, whether you agree with it or not, it's a different story. But I'm just saying, when you try to unite all religions and everyone under the same umbrella without having that same faith, it's going to fall, like the Tower of Babel fell in the Old Testament. So that's all we're saying is false peace is being purported throughout the lands. They're obviously going to use war upcoming here to solidify the one world religion. That's where I would say that this false prophet character, who in my opinion is not Francis, by the way. I think some people, there's actually Catholics saying that and non-Catholics saying that. He's not. What's coming after Francis is far worse, if you can believe it or not.
Well, I mean, certainly if you read the book Revelation, there's a lot of parallels to the times that we live in now and what's talked about in that specific book. And you can say that we're at a particular timeline now, possibly because of what's in there. Do you think that Revelation, the book of Revelation, is pretty solid and we're actually going through those times right now?
Yeah, it's excellent that you mentioned that, Rex, because when Sister Lucia, one of those who was given the message by Our Lady at Fatima, there was 3 children. She was one of them. And she was asked about that, and she said, yeah, it's a replay of the book of Revelation. So when the Blessed Virgin Mary has come to warm at approved church apparitions, whether it's been Our Lady of La Salette, we can get into that maybe in a little bit, because she actually forewarned of all these earth changes, pole shift, which is probably something your non-Catholic listeners might not have heard this, but this was back in the 1840s that she warned of this in France. And then also at Akita, 1973, another approved visionary, this solar kill shot that everyone's talking about, the sun. I mean, the sun plays an intricate part from our perspective into what's going on. This is in Revelation too. I think it's Revelation 8:7, where it talks about a third of the earth is burned. Well, in the message of Akita, Our Lady says that fire would fall down from the heavens. As a matter of fact, I have it right in front of me. She says, if men do not repent and better themselves, the Father will inflict a terrible punishment on all humanity. It will be a punishment greater than a deluge than at Noah's time, such as one will have never seen before. Fire will fall from the sky and wipe out a great part of humanity, the good as the good as well as the bad, sparing neither priests nor the faithful. Now, this fire is not nuclear related. This is concerning the sun. And I've had on, I'm not sure if you're aware of Ben Davidson's work over at Suspicious Observers, but I've had him on and thrown some models at him, prophetic models, because he comes at it from a scientific point of view. And he said, yeah, it's very possible that those things could happen. So pay attention to the sun, ladies and gentlemen. The 100-year anniversary of Fatima is coming up, 2017. That's next year. And I think you're going to see a chastisement from the sun that is going to wipe out a great part of humanity. And the one world religion is in there, by the way. What is it? Revelation 17, the harlot, Babylon. Many people want to try to take that and interpret it as America in a loose sense, but that's not actually what the Catholic Church Fathers warned about. They said that the city of Seven Hills was either Rome or Jerusalem, or Rome and Jerusalem together. The common opinion was actually that it was both. So what I've been saying is, obviously we see this one world religion coming through Rome, right? The Catholic Church is being used as a front to get across this one world religion. And soon it will be headed by this false prophet whose name is Yeshua ben Joseph. He is, in my opinion, the Antichrist sidekick. Every Batman has to have his Robin, and that's who this character is going to be after Francis bails out here soon. And he's going to be the one to purport this new age religion. So basically the Catholic Church and the Catholic sacraments will be booted out of Rome, and that brings up a whole other discussion as to who is the true pope, where's the Catholic Church going, things like that. But yes, it's in Revelations, no question about it.
Now, I remember about a year ago on C-SPAN, I think it was, the three world religions, the leaders of each religion got together and basically had a kumbaya fest, and a lot of people speculated that that was the beginning of this sign that was talked about in the book of Revelation. Do you think the same thing?
Well, yeah, again, the whole ecumenical movement, if you will, and again, it's heretical from a Catholic standpoint. It stems back in the 80s, started with Pope John Paul II. There's a lot of Catholics who think he was actually a great pope. We would certainly disagree with him. He was another one giving occultic hand signs, teaching Freemasonic principles. He was actually an actor before he even became a priest. He followed New Age teachings such as Teilhard de Chardin, followed Blavatsky. So the ecumenical movement actually would date back. Well, I mean, that was within the Catholic Church, if you will. I mean, the one world religion movement, like I said, has been going on for a long time now. I mean, Pope St. Pius X was warning about this in one of his encyclicals. I believe it was Notre Charge, it was called, when he was speaking to some bishops out in France, where he blew the whistle on it because he saw it that early in the early 1900s. But then it became very popular, and still to this day. I mean, they're having interfaith meetings in Poland recently. There's another one where Francis is going to be talking to Protestants. That's in D.C. coming up, I believe, in July at some point. Then you have a Lutheran commemoration coming up in the Vatican. I mean, all these things to a Catholic, and again, this is no disrespect to any Protestant out there. These are things that you can't do as a Catholic. I mean, you can't go around and purport and say, from a Catholic perspective, that some of these heretical teachers are good and they weren't as bad. I mean, it's just purporting how they're trying to get everyone to come together under one umbrella. Let's push everything aside. Let's push doctrine aside. They'll use World War III as an excuse to unite the religion, kind of like in John Lennon hippie Woodstock fashion.
That's a scary song, by the way. I really, I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm sorry to interrupt. A lot of people look at that. Imagine. It sounds great, doesn't it? No religion, no heaven, no hell. You don't got to worry about nothing. Everything's wonderful. We're all one. But when I hear that song, man, I think of the Borg.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and that's it. I mean, if you want a theme song for the Second Vatican Council and what's transpired, that's it. Imagine. I mean, that's all they're doing. Literally, the popes before the Second Vatican Council called these men now in charge, whether they're popes, cardinals, or bishops, going along with this, they called them dreamers, insane dreamers, because they're trying to create a world in which you can't have true unity. You just, again, from our perspective, I can only teach from this, that you can't have true unity outside of the Catholic faith. So when you start twisting it and contorting it and saying, yeah, everyone's just great. I mean, you could literally, Rex, right now, worship cheese. And I say that sarcastically, but you know,
they do have the religion called the Spaghetti Monster. That's a true story.
Yeah, I saw that. That's over in New Zealand. I saw that. We reported on that too. What was that, about a month or so ago? But yeah, I mean, that's just it. I mean, it's very diabolical, and it fits in. And I'm sure you call to light how the Illuminati works, however you want to call them. Problem, reaction, solution, and that's what they're trying to get everyone into, is this one world religion nonsense. But it's quite frightening to see how many are deceived. And I would also point out, this was forewarned. This apostasy in the church was forewarned in Scripture. 1 Thessalonians 2:4. It was called the revolt. We've even had cardinals such as Cardinal Sunens come out after the Second Vatican Council, and he literally called it the French Revolution in the church. So it was a great revolt wherein the principles of man were purported, given rights to man instead of rights to God in the Catholic Church. So the same principles that were behind the revolution in France, some of which were transported, if you will, to the American Revolution, to where, again, we talked about this before, separation of church and state, right to religious liberty. See, to us, Rex, that's not a good thing. I'll give you an example. You talked about before how they're now building all these Baphomets or whatever. Well, you see some people and Satanism growing here in the United States, Luciferianism. And so that whole concept of right to religious liberty, I'm confused by those who are coming out against these Satanists in this respect. I mean, don't they have the same right that a Catholic would or a Protestant would under the current teachings in this country? And the answer is yes, right to religious liberty. That's their religion. You see, if we were a truly Christian country, we'd be promoting what's called the social kingship of Christ. If Christ truly came to this earth, and again, from our perspective, established the Catholic religion, then only that Catholic faith should be purported, and all of these other false religion sects shouldn't have public rights. Not to take away from anyone's free will. You have free will to say no, but to give it a public right, absolute no. And so we take a look back. What's the one country right now that pretty much we can say resembles a good Catholic or Christian society without being it yet? And that's Russia. I mean, take a look at Russia. Doesn't play games over there. You want to march around half naked and do your gay pride thing, you'll be thrown in jail. And so what I'm saying is we become more and more liberal, and they become more and more orthodox. Now, the reason why I mentioned that, Rex, is per the message.
I have noticed that.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Putin, he doesn't deal with GMOs. You want to try to bring GMOs in his country? Guess what? You're now considered a terrorist. Okay, so my point is they become more...
Rightfully so.
Yeah, exactly. And so my point is that's the key element to Fatima. Our Lady said in 1917 that Russia would spread her errors. At that point, remember, it was communism, and that has spread all over the world, obviously. But then she also said that it's basically heaven's plan that men are not going to repent when they should, and that ultimately Russia is going to be used to scourge the world, and they're going to wipe out a good number of nations. And so from our perspective, you see U.S. and NATO building up all these forces on their border over there in Ukraine. And what do you expect? I mean, what would we do today, Rex, if Russia started building up all sorts of defense missiles up there in Canada, started bringing troops down into Mexico? Don't you think you'd be a little concerned?
Well, you remember when China kept devaluing the yen, and then all of a sudden, boom, an entire industrial zone gets wiped off the face of the earth, basically. You can see these 42-foot containers, hundreds of them, get thrown around like boxes of cereal or something. And that was probably from some type of satellite-based weapon where the powers that be said, no, you better quit messing with your currency, or we're going to show you who's boss.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Russia and China play an intricate part. I mean, Russia specifically with the message of Fatima, because ultimately she said that Russia would be consecrated to her Immaculate Heart. So as Catholics, what we're waiting for is a pope to actually say this specific consecration where Russia is mentioned, that they get devoted to this devotion called the Immaculate Heart in the Catholic Church. Once that's done with all the union of the bishops in the world, that world peace would come about, so that there would be a true world peace again. And this is where, from our perspective, from Catholic prophecy, this is where the tide begins to turn after World War III starts, and the world starts to get it, that they've been duped by the New World Order, that this one world religion is just phony baloney, and then people start to come back to the Catholic faith from our perspective. And this is long. I mean, there's just so many Catholic prophecies to indicate that. But what I'm saying is Russia is the main player. Russia and France are the two main countries you got to pay attention to going forward. Sadly, with America, I don't know what to say. I mean, Russia's definitely going to attack America. There's no doubt about it. We've been stepping on the bear's paw for far too long, and they're going to, whether it's nuclear, whether it's scalar technology, who knows? I mean, they're on record as saying they could wipe us out in 15 minutes, and I believe it with this scalar technology that can just basically vaporize us. It's not going to happen like that, but I'm saying, I mean, there's that technology there that's 50 plus years in advance that could be used, but it's going to get really ugly real fast, Rex.
You think it's going to happen this year?
Well, you know what? You see, when people ask me about, and this is where we're getting to Planet X here a little bit later, there's no doubt that the Vatican and the world governments, they know this thing is inbound. I mean, they've known for well over 50 years. I mean, I've talked to the Bob Fletchers of the world, and, I try to take bits and pieces from everyone, do my own research, and knowing what I know and how it ties in with Catholic prophecy, come up with a more general time frame. Not that it's good to be giving dates. You should never really give dates, but it's very possible by year's end. Well, I've been on record as saying that the economic collapse would happen by year's end. This is in the New Age's writing. When you go to that Maitreya's website, you will see in his own writings that this is going to happen by year's end. And that's important to know, because these are the guys who are pulling the strings in the world. I mean, they're controlling everything. I've had some top-notch economists, Andy Hoffman, Greg Manarino, just to name a couple on the show, and they all say the same thing. You better be getting out of stocks. You better be moving into tangible assets. Some are preaching gold. The only thing I have, with that is, you can't eat gold when push comes to shove. It's in my opinion, it's better to have land and to be able to grow, to be self-sufficient and grow your own food supply and have water. Yeah, so that's why, I realize that Andy has to push that because that's his trade. But that's one of the questions I asked him about tangible assets is like start having your processes in place now. Start prepping. I would also add, coastlines in major cities will not be safe. Major cities won't be safe due to the economic collapse. They'll probably collapse the whole welfare system. You'll see those people in inner cities going nuts. I mean, it's going to be like that zombie land movie. I mean, people are just going to be out shooting each other for food, for water. This is not fear mongering, ladies and gentlemen. This is just the reality of what the new world order wants. Now, your question may be, Rex, well, why is that? I mean, why do they want to collapse everything? Well, of course, they're nefarious. But in order for a new savior to be brought into the world, think about how bad it has to be for people who call themselves Christian right now to bow down to this Maitreya character coming. Think about how desperate you have to be. I mean, pretty darn desperate. So that's why they're controlling the food supplies. I'm sure you cover, HARP and geoengineering. We had Dane Wigington on recently. We talked about that. I mean, they can manifest these famines. And also, I mean, Planet X to me as a far, if Planet X is the main thing really to consider. I mean, all these other, geoengineering events, if you will, I think are should take the back seat to Planet X and the Earth changes that are transpiring from that. But the bottom line is we're being set up for this Antichrist figure who will come on the world scene and say, "Yep, I have all the answers to your problems," and that's what they're going to push. By the way, it's socialism. This with the whole mark of the beast too, Rex. I'm not sure if you've listened to any of my talks. I did a talk on this a few weeks ago concerning the mark of the beast. The mark of the beast is actually not really the chip.
What is it?
It's actually secondary. Now, it's a part of the equation. When you read the Luciferian writings, Blavatsky and all them, it's what they're going to do in Rome is this. The Catholic Church has 7 sacraments, right? I mean, ranging from baptism, confirmation, matrimony, and all that. List goes on and on. Well, they're going to implant that with a 5-step self-realization program. So, very much esoteric, very much how the Eastern false religions would teach, coming from the Kabbalah even. And so that's what's kind of interesting in my recent research. Well, let me just break it down to you like this. Okay, it's a counterfeit baptism. Remember we were talking about counterfeit? The devil likes to counterfeit.
Uh-huh.
Well, it's going to be a counterfeit symbol in which everyone will be identified as into the new religion. So could it look like how those Hindus and Buddhists, they have that little red mark in their forehead,
right?
And that very much represents the third eye. And that ties in with this whole higher consciousness. It's very much Luciferianism when you start studying these Eastern false religions. And so in order for anyone to buy and sell first, to get that chip, you got to have this mark on your forehead. You got to be sealed into the new age religion. You follow? So after everything collapses, this character will show up on the scene, the false prophet. He'll unite all humanity and he'll say, okay, if you want to step into the new age with us, come step into the new age. But in order for you to be able to buy or sell, to get that chip, you got to have this mark. You got to have this false counterfeit baptism. You can find this talk. I think it's like an hour or two. I go into detail with all the writings on my YouTube channel at TradCatKnight under the prophecy section. But it's really interesting to see how most people miss and they kind of stay focused in on the RFID chip when in reality, what the Catholic Church fathers warned about was this counterfeit baptism. Saint Hildegard warned about this. It's a false seal, if you will, much like Christians are sealed with that true symbol of baptism. Only who you're going to be surrendering your allegiance to? This Maitreya character.
I remember reading the Mark of the Beast in Revelations, and there's different translations of that Mark of the Beast, or at least that specific sentence, right? Because it started with an original language. It was either Hebrew or Greek, and then they translated that. And a lot of people thought the Mark of the Beast, when the Social Security number rolled out, a lot of people felt that was the Mark of the Beast. So a lot of stuff we're talking about now is making me wonder, are we already in these times? Have we been in Revelation or a specific part of that book or that prophecy for a long time and we don't even realize it? It's fascinating to think about the mark of the beast, the America as a whole, because America was basically founded by Freemasonry and the people, and I know some awesome Freemasons, so don't get me, I mean, there's some amazing people out there in my opinion that are Freemasons, but from the research that I've done, a lot of the people that actually founded America, they could care less about what somebody's beliefs were.
Yeah, and I agree with your point. I mean, again, John Salza was a 32nd degree Freemason. He finally caught on to the game. The lower level ranking Masons have no idea what they're following as Luciferian. It's only until you get a certain point where you're truly shown the way, if you will, and that's where these high ranking Masons, they know very much what they're doing, and they're trying to create this new world order. Right, even on the back of our dollar bill was it Novus Ordo Seclorum with the pyramid with the all seeing eye. I mean, that's not there. That's not there by mistake. Our country has very nefarious origins. A lot of people would like to think that. I mean, we're certainly not a Catholic country. There are some Christian principles intermingled into it, but there's a lot of things that we need to get corrected in this country if we're going to, make it through the times ahead. One of which, of course, is religious liberty that we talked about. But yeah, in terms of where we're at, it's a process of moving. You don't just go from Christ to Antichrist in a matter of weeks or even a couple of decades. I mean, even with the Second Vatican Council, look, it's been 50 years. They've had to brainwash people in that new religion in order for us to get to this point. It's just not a plan that takes 2 years and say, oh, yep, I'll buy into that ecumenical movement. I'll buy into the latest novelties that are coming out. Even the new mass. The new mass that was constructed in 1969 came from the hands of Freemasons. It came from Bunini. He was a known Freemason. And he was trying to make Catholicism more compatible with Protestantism, which you can't do as a Catholic. So the bottom line is it's a process, the mystery of iniquity that's talked about in Scripture. And we're moving along in this process. But yes, the mark of the beast, when you read the church fathers, when you read the tradition of the church, it very much is the counterfeit baptism. And then secondary comes, this chip. And so that's why I've been telling people, you better get off of this, off of the grid now, get out of the system, get off coastlines, get out of major cities. In my opinion, this could be the summer of blood. I think you probably see, even with the elections coming up, you're seeing all this animosity. The anti-Trump protesters are coming out, the Soros funded movements, occupy this, occupy that. A lot of animosity in the world. They want this. They want race war. They want this state versus state. They want country versus country. They want kingdom versus kingdom, as our Lord said. And that's why the message of Fatima is important to us as Catholics, because she reassures us that everything's going to work out in the end, and that the world will have true peace, at least for a shorter period of time.
And the religions themselves are so powerful. I myself was raised Christian, and nowadays I am very agnostic to many subjects. And when I say agnostic, I just mean I don't know. I certainly want to know. I'm searching for the truth, but I don't know anymore. And I do see, however, a lot of the stuff that you're talking about. I can see these nefarious forms of mind control, manipulation, what I call dark ecstasy throughout the masses. These corporations feed off of hurting people. They don't profit off of helping the world, creating balance. And there's so many things out there that could be changed and changed for the better. Look at all the stuff that most people consume in their daily lives, the food that they're eating, like you brought up earlier, the genetically modified stuff. There's so much nasty out there. And instead of these companies being like, okay, well, we're going to come up with Diet Coke and put aspartame in there, which is one of the most lethal toxins available to the public, and then genetically modified corn and high fructose corn syrup and different colorings and additives and stuff. And then they say, well, if you want to get this organic soda that has 4 ingredients, it costs twice as much. But this stuff that's got like 28 different ingredients on it is half the price. So how does that make any logical sense?
Well, that's just it. Actually, I don't know if you saw this, Rex. Pepsi is going to reintroduce aspartame back into their products. It was just a few days ago they said they're going to put aspartame back in, and aspartame just completely messes your brain up, to put it in layman's terms. But yeah, what we break it down to, at least from my perspective, is from a Catholic point of view, we're either moving towards Christ and His Sacred Heart, or we're staying in just man. Man in and of himself can't save himself from a Catholic perspective. He needs grace. He needs to have Christ. He needs to have the church's teachings in his life in order for there to be order in his soul. When there's order in his soul, then he can take it out into society. Now, what have these specific Jews and Masons been doing? They've been causing revolutions. They've been doing everything disorderly. So that's really the snake's head to it. Truly is. And again, I'm not. I can only say it objectively. I'm not trying to subjectively bash anyone, but that's the reality when you study it. Because in the end, the UN and Israel are going to support this Maitreya character. The third temple in Jerusalem is currently being built for this Maitreya character in Israel. So the Jews will this will be his guy, Maitreya.
How did you find out about him?
Oh, just years of study. Going through college, many people ask this. I was an ex-athlete myself, but on and off again, I'd study these things: Illuminati, secret society, all these things I just thought were probably dumb at that point. But over the course of decades, it started to mount up, and it started to become very clear to me what the overall agenda was. And that's where I would tell people is to start with him and then work backwards, because that's where we're headed. We're headed into this new age. Again, the New World Order is very much a one-world socialist republic under this Antichrist who's going to be accepted by the Jews. Now, I don't want to lose any of your listeners here, but again, when we go to Scripture, 1 Thessalonians 2:14 through 16, it says that the Jews killed Christ. They don't accept him. So now they've been, for all of this time, trying to bring their Messiah into the world. So if people want to, when people come and ask me what's the real threat, and again, it's not every Jew. Listen, I have Jew friends. We're not anti-Semitic. I'm not anti-racist. I'm just giving it to you real. Just like how you give certain topics on your channel is real. This is just the reality of the matter. These certain, they're called the synagogue of Satan, which is in Revelation. You know, these certain Jews who say they're Jews, but they're really not. They form this whole puppet state called Israel, ultimately to get their guy into the scene. That's where the world capital is basically going to be, Jerusalem. And again, tying back, remember, with the harlot, with Babylon in Revelation, Jerusalem. That's what the Catholic Church Father said, either Rome or Jerusalem. Yeah, I mean, I've studied on and off again, and I just arrived at that conclusion that this is where we are headed. Maitreya is a character that most people don't take seriously because he's been around, I think, since like the 70s, like in terms of a website, but he's been kind of like lurking off in the shadows, waiting for things to be set up for him. And I can tell you that in all my studies, his sidekick, the false prophet, once you see Bergoglio, once you see Francis talking about how he might resign, or when he does, look for this guy to show up because he's the one that's going to take over, and in conjunction with the United Nations, they'll form this one world religion. What's interesting to know too, I had a man by the name of Bernard Jansen who knew Father Malachi Martin. Have you ever heard of him, Father Malachi Martin?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so he's been on Coast to Coast. He did all kinds of non-Catholic shows too. I mean, he was trying to get the word out too. Well, he's the one that blew the whistle on Planet X too. I mean, he said, pay attention to the skies. You'll see a red cross in the sky. When you see that bad boy, you better hunker down and get ready for the worst of the worst. Because we're seeing those signs right now. I'm sure you cover the Earth changes and all that too. I mean, we're seeing us move along that path, but those certain key chastisements, whether it's the solar kill shot, the CME, or what we call the 3 days of darkness. That's a Catholic prophecy, by the way, that I see very much contorted. People are calling it 6 days of darkness now. It's coming this August. No, it's actually a Catholic prophecy, and it's going to land on a specific Catholic feast day. And so there's certain signs and things I look for with that, but that's a side topic. But in the 3 days of darkness alone, 3/4 of the world are going to perish over those 3 days. And that's outside of World War III, which will probably kill, billions in and of itself. So whatever's left will be killed during the 3 days of darkness. Maybe at some point we could do a whole show on that. But he came out and, basically warned. And I have a direct quote for your listeners here, okay? I managed to pull this off of his website, which was called starharbor.org, and I knew the powers that be would eventually crush his website because I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but he was basically murdered. And I found out the reason why from someone who was close to him. He was basically writing a book. He wrote a lot of books that were called faction. It was fact mixed with fiction.
Okay.
You know what I mean? He couldn't necessarily call out cardinals in the church by name who were Luciferians.
Sure.
So he had to use pseudonames for them. Well, what he was doing was he was working on a book to where he was literally going to call out these satanic pedophiles, these Luciferians, and sure enough, a couple months later, he fell down the stairs and died. I mean, does anyone really believe that? So everyone who was in on the know, and then also I would argue he was shooting the horn about Planet X because he was over and over again, like on Art Bell's show, saying, like, I can't say it verbatim because they'll kill me, basically, is what he was saying. I mean, you can't talk about these subjects and really not have any kind of backlash. I think we're at the point where Planet X is becoming, I don't want to say mainstream, but you're probably seeing this too, how many more people that you thought wouldn't adopt what we're saying about Planet X is coming to the to the knowledge that, okay, yeah, something is affecting our planet, giving all these changes.
Oh, yeah.
But the actual quote I wanted to give to you from Father Martin was this, and this is a portion of the real Third Secret of Fatima, which hasn't been revealed by the Vatican for obvious reasons. I mean, this nefarious group in the Vatican is not going to come out and publicly toot their own whistle and say, "Yep, we've been changing around church doctrine and we're trying to form a one world religion." I mean, that's not going to happen, folks. No one's that idiotic. So here's Father Martin. He says, because Fatima is a very apocalyptic message. It says that no matter what happens, there are going to be terrible wars. There are going to be diseases. Whole nations are going to be wiped out. There's going to be a 3 days darkness. There are going to be epidemics that wipe out whole nations overnight. Parts of the earth will be washed away at sea in violent tornadoes and storms. In the end, it's not a nice message at all. So, there's another part to it we haven't talked about, is the whole epidemics side to this. I mean, I'm sure you're well aware of all these man-made created epidemics that they have. I had on a very special guest, Dr. Boyle, who studied these things. And, he came to the agreement, too, that it's quite possible that they could drop, via chemtrail spraying, like a bubonic plague or something, and literally just wipe out areas of this country or just countries in general and just kill them, in a matter of days. I mean, who knows what they have out there to literally kill you overnight. But that's very much a key aspect to this, is the whole chemtrail program, epidemics. What's the latest right now? It's Zika.
The Zika virus that supposedly people are getting from mosquitoes, which is most likely maybe a little bit of truth to that. Every year they've got a new designer disease coming out, whether it's the swine flu or the donkey cold or whatever. It's just retarded.
Yeah, Ebola too. And in my part, I just had on one of the leading international vaccine experts, Dr. Tenpenny, on the show a couple of days ago, and she agreed with me too. It's all propaganda, all these things.
Then
Now
they'll
I
get
did,
you the vaccine, which is actually going to be a lot more dangerous than the
yeah.
stuff they tell you about.
Yeah, problem, reaction, solution, right? Here's the problem. We've got this whatever virus. They fear monger with the mainstream media, and then guess what? You go out and get your swine flu, and then you'll either become paralyzed or probably just killed on the spot to begin with. So listen, these people are freaks. Let's just be honest. They're psychopaths. They're freaks. What I was trying to get back to an original point was, and I lost my train of thought. Forgive me, a little under the weather still, but is this whole culture, the Catholic culture versus this culture of self and death. Being selfish, the whole ends of it, which are death, whether it starts from, pornography, whether it's abortion, which is it's nothing less than Moloch worship in the end. That's why you're never going to see probably abortion, put down in this country, is because they know it's a sacrifice to Satan. They want to continue that on. So we're under the hand of God, and that's why I say divine justice is coming here very soon. So that's what we have to look, at a timeline and see on our own actions. Are we truly being selfish? Are we doing those things that, from a Catholic's perspective, our Lord would want to do? And that's what we're trying to do. I mean, we're trying to do our very best to not only cause awareness, educate people, but then also take action. It doesn't do good for us Catholics to just pray the rosary and do things like that. I mean, we got to get out there and be foot soldiers and start wanting to do something about this. And the interesting point is, again, I've had a lot of people on my show, Rex, who are not Catholics. And again, I keep the doors open. There's some Catholics who don't like that I have non-Catholics on my own show. Well, guess what? Get over it. Too bad. You're not going to, you're not going to help people come into what we're trying to say by closing, locking yourself in a closet and taking that approach. It's not going to work. So anyway, my point is, I've had some, like Tim Kennedy, UFC fighter. He's been on my show. EJ Snyder.
Tim Kennedy's been on your show?
Oh yeah, Tim Kennedy's been on my show. We email frequently, actually. I post a lot of his blogs. We talk. He's not Catholic, but I've sent him videos. I think he understands, what we're saying. EJ Snyder, that new dual survivor guy.
I read an article about Kennedy just the other day. I was going to send him out an email. That is so funny.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He's a character.
The article was called something like "MMA guys" or a lot of MMA guys are conspiracy theorists or something like that.
Yeah, I actually invited another guy on. Goodness, I found him the other day. He was on a Joe Rogan show. I forget his name. He's an MMA guy, but he was talking about all these things that we cover. From the non-Catholic point of view. I mean, there's certain elements that we could talk about, and I forget his name now. He's kind of like a Mexican guy, shorter guy. Anyway, I forget his name. I invited him on the show. Hopefully, I'll hear from him. But
that's really cool.
Yeah, so we bring in all kinds of people, ex-presidential candidates like Merlin Miller, who was under Ron Paul. Ron Paul's, independent or one of the Tea Parties. And they get it, they understand that there's a theological difference there. But what I'm saying is when this character shows up, this Maitreya character, I really think that people will see the two paths. It's either a return back to what we're saying or, hey, you're going into the New Age. There really is going to be like no middle ground at that point because it's going to be so apparent what the process has been all along, whether it's coming through the Vatican or coming through these puppets which we have in place all across the world, whether it's the Obamas right now and the Clintons or even over there in Europe with Merkel's and all that nonsense. So it'll be interesting to see how these elections play out. But anyway, the third secret of Fatima very much is fundamental for this transition we would call into a shorter period of true peace in the world.
Yeah. And for those that have an opportunity to listen to this podcast, I'd strongly recommend going to TradCatKnight.blogspot.com. Also, if you go to YouTube, I think you've got over 900 videos on your channel now with well over 40,000 subscribers. That's fantastic. Some great work on there. And I just really appreciate everything you're doing. Now, before we close out tonight, we've got a few minutes left. Is there anything you'd like to share with our audience before we have a chance to speak next time?
Well, as much as you might get painted a doom and gloom or two. We're really not all about that. What I try to do is keep information moving worldwide. So I advise people to, any of their latest information coming from their world, just email me at apostleofmary@hotmail.com. We're realists. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, we're not trying to fearmonger. We're not trying to put fear porn out there. This is the times we live in. But in the end, the essential element of that message of Fatima is about faith and hope. We talked about the eagle symbology earlier, Rex. Well, again, the double-headed eagle representing church and state. But the wings represent faith and hope. That's what's going to take us through this time period because, these socialists and nefarious people, they're coming for your land. They're going to come for you personally with the FEMA camps, which I'm sure you guys probably cover on your channel. That's all very real. Anyone who doesn't want to be a part of the New Age, who doesn't have this counterfeit symbol, baptism on their forehead, they're going to come round us up. Whether you're Catholic or not, it really doesn't matter. They're going to round you up. They'll put you in these FEMA camps and you'll be exterminated. But it truly is about faith and hope. Because from our perspective, again, Our Lady brought our Lord into the world, and so She plays a very strong intercessory role. She literally is called from an analogy standpoint the Ark of the Covenant. So if we can use the symbology in the Old Testament of her being that ark that carried through those 8 people through the flood, well, those from our perspective who stay close to Our Lady and her intercession will be carried through these times with a special protection. So that's basically what I'm about. My conversion came about, so Rex, through her intercession. I was a very immoral person, addicted to sex, pornography. I mean, I've been in jail. I'm very open about my story and how I got my act together. I came to her. And so I know that may sound strange to a lot of people, but I haven't been without a day without a rosary around my neck and a scapular, and I'm trying to just help people with this awareness. But definitely would like to come back on. We could, any one of these topics, Rex, like whether it's the 3 days of darkness. I've been on the Kevin Baker show too recently. I think I'm going to cover that with him specifically because I could probably talk an hour or two on that alone on the things you need to do. There's certain things you need to do or you're not going to make it through that period of 3 days of darkness as Planet X is passing. So, again, TradCatKnight.blogspot.com. Check us out daily. You can find me on Facebook. Actually, you can search Eric Gajewski, look for the double-headed eagle. I mean, we're on social media all over the place: Google Plus, Twitter. You find us everywhere. So appreciate the time, Rex, and look forward to next time.
Absolutely. Check out TradCatKnight.blogspot.com. Also, become a member at LeakProject.com. You'll have access to exclusive content first, and be the change you want to see. This is Rex Bear. Good night. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this edition of Leak Project. I am your host, Rex Bear, and we have guest Eric Gajewski with us from TradCatKnight.com, one of the most viewed and followed traditional Catholic websites worldwide, as seen on Gloria TV, Spirit Daily, Shoebat, Reddit, Before It's News, and many other notable websites. Eric interviews guests from around the world concerning the third secret of Fatima and Planet X and how it all ties together. Different conspiracies, secret societies, mystery schools, the Illuminati, biblical prophecies, and many other topics are discussed with Eric and his guests. So if you'd like to know more, check out his YouTube channel, TradCatKnight, updated almost daily. And it's a real honor to speak with you, Eric. Thanks for joining us here at the Leak Project. How the heck are you?
Doing very well, Rex. I appreciate the consideration for having me on, and I look forward to this next hour covering whatever you want to get into, sir.
Absolutely. Now, you have so much... You've got such a following on your website and your YouTube channel. You reach tens of thousands of people. And what is it like for you going down this path? I mean, what got you onto this journey?
Well, again, what we try to do is try to take the current events and plug it into the equation from a traditional Catholic point of view, which is a little different because most of your outlets, your news outlets, are predominantly going to be Protestantism, or the mainstream is really controlled by, however you want to say it, the global elite, however you want to pin them. And so it's a little bit different when people are coming onto our page and getting the information. But essentially, that's the reason why I started this, is because we felt from a traditional Catholic point of view, the right information wasn't getting out there. The proper angle or spin, however you want to put it, wasn't getting out to the mainstream. And so that's why I started, with TradCatKnight, it was 2.5 years ago, but before that, Defeat Modernism. And ever since that, we've been trying to expose the corruption in the Catholic Church, the Judeo-Freemasonic takeover of the church, which ties in with the third secret of Fatima. And, we've got a lot of celebrities, athletes. As a matter of fact, last night when I was doing a little evangelizing, I reached out to a few more international models that I was talking to off to the side, and they're now following along. So that's what I do. It's getting very late in the hour. All the signs are here. And as I mentioned off air, Planet X certainly is an aspect of the third secret of Fatima. So that's what we do. We try to obviously bring individuals to the light from our perspective of the true faith and Catholicism, and take it from there and show how all of this, interplays with one another, whether it's, GMOs or whether it's, chemtrails. I mean, all this stuff ties into this end time global conspiracy, if you want to call it.
Now, when would you say the Vatican or the Catholic religion got taken over?
Well, when you study what the popes said prior to the Second Vatican Council, which is really our main focus, was this council that got together and basically labeled it Catholic, but it wasn't. It was these Freemasonic principles, and Freemasonry is an opposed religion to the Catholic religion. And in the end, truly, it's a satanic pedophile club, to say the least. And it's something the church always warned about before the Second Vatican Council. Several popes in particular, Pope Leo the 13th, Pope St. Pius the 10th, and they warned in the late 1800s, early 1900s that the Catholic Church had been infiltrated, that they were in the bosom of the church. And basically, you know, the whole false prophet routine, the whole sheep and wolves clothing. That was actually the scripture for today for us in the church. And that's what we have. We have a situation right now. I've been on air publicly saying this, that I believe Francis is not only the true pope, we can get into this a little bit, but he's a 33rd degree Freemason, given all the teachings that he puts out there, and then also the hand signs, his occultic hand signs, his Freemasonic hand signs, the hidden hand, the Baphomet, all that. It's really, I don't think people realize how close we are to these, what we would call the great chastisements, but it's long before the 1950s, Rex.
Okay. Now, also, when you look at some of the Freemason degrees, I've done a lot of research into that mystery school, and I know that you can get up to the 32nd degree, and then after that, if there's different levels and degrees, it's not a part of the specific Freemasonry. There's other, I guess, sects or offshoots of the Freemasons. But how did you get to that number 33? That's what I'm wondering.
Well, 33rd degree is a very significant number. I guess it's just through research, Rex. In the end, for us, I would agree with you there. I would say the lower level Masons have no idea that what they're following in the end is Luciferian, but you could study Albert Pike in his book, so what was it, Schools and Dogma, Moral Schools and Dogma, or something like that. But when you really study it, the upper echelon Freemasons very much know that it's Luciferian, and again, from our perspective, world order, world socialist republic, which is going to have a one world religion. Now, Freemasonry and universalism ties together. So within the Freemasonic sect, I mean, you could be quote unquote a Catholic, a Protestant, a Buddhist, so long as you basically forego some of the fundamental teachings, you can, and you look at your neighbor as having an equal opinion, then you're A-OK, so to speak. And that's what you're seeing in the Vatican II church, or what's transpired in the church since Vatican II, is you see this constant relaying that, you know, other religions are okay. Everyone can be incorporated into the church. That's even written in the Vatican II texts themselves. But yeah, it's an interesting study for me. I mean, just for me, it requires a lot of study. But I would definitely say that Francis is a 33rd degree Mason, and I've seen others. I think there was another. He wasn't even Catholic. I forget his last name. But he came out publicly and said that he believed he was a 33rd degree Mason. And there's also we have a notable traditional Catholic apologist, John Salza. You could look him up on YouTube. But he was a 32nd degree Freemason, and he came out of that sect and ultimately started blowing the whistle and tooting the horn on the Second Vatican Council as well. But for me, yeah, it's just the actual teachings and then some of the hand signs that are given.
Okay. Now, obviously, when you look at certain hand signs and gestures, there's the as above, so below. There's a lot of different things that people can do in pictures to where if you're not, I guess you could say, in the know with those certain hand gestures, then you just look at it like, okay, that's just a typical picture. So certainly things to look for. I was just wondering about the 33rd degree thing. But another thing I've also noticed is the Vatican is really pushing this approach towards, at least I saw this video, correct me if I'm wrong here,